in Venezuela. Within that framework, I have to mention the break of the diplomatic relations that President Maduro announced yesterday, which I believe is the least and the most decent thing that we as a government can do to try to make the world and make the US understand that they cannot do whatever they want. So yes, the President Maduro announced yesterday that Venezuela is cutting all diplomatic and consular relations with the US, and that he gave the Department of State 72 hours for all diplomatic and consular US operating in Venezuela to leave our country. A few hours later, the State Department make public a communique in which they say that they did not recognize, which is kind of like too much, that they did not recognize Maduro as president, and that they recognize Guaido, and because of that they were not going to leave the country. And it's like, wow, these guys are very, very out of focus, out of whatever. They are not even respecting the forms to try to get rid of Venezuelan government. So let's see what happened today. President Maduro, talking about that, he says that he mentioned that craziness and irrationality of the Department of State, and he said that he hoped that the Department of State at some point realized that they have to behave more rationally. But he rated that the U.S. diplomatic and consular officers in Venezuela have to leave the country at most this Sunday. And he also announced that the Venezuelan diplomatic officers and consular officers, not only in Washington but in all the Venezuelan consulate in the U.S., have to are actually coming back to Venezuela this Saturday. So we are not, just bluffing about doing stuff. I mean, the Venezuelan government has decided to do the ultimate diplomatic decision that any country can do, especially taking into consideration how relevant the U.S. is in the international scenario. Disregarding the lack of the loss of influence in recent years, but that's something that I want to talk about a little bit later. So that's the current situation in that area, and let's see what happened. But I believe that I don't have to say too much about it, because it's more than evident that this is like the U.S. government acting like a political party in Venezuela and trying to take power. Of course, you always, when you see that kind of behavior, you have to wonder yourself, why is this happening? And of course, you have to remind people that we are behind my foot. We have the biggest oil reserve in the world, even bigger than the Saudi Arabia one. We have one of the biggest reserves of gold, of gas, of coltan, and these new minerals. So the government of the U.S. is behind that. But they are not going to get it. I can assure you that. Now I'm going to talk about the flagrant violation, of international law. No one, at least in the hemisphere, nothing like this happened ever, at least from my knowledge. The US government trying to impose like a parallel government in a Latin American country. I know that this is a recipe that was used in Libya or maybe in other Middle Eastern countries by the US, and they have experience doing that. But Latin America is a more complex place. And I believe that this strategy is not going to work, and is in violation of all the regional forms and of all the international forms in terms of public international law. So and even they having the control of the OAS, they couldn't do something like that in the middle of the OAS, even though they have Luis Almagro, which is a puppet of the US, of the CIA, of the Department of State, and he do whatever they ask him to do. So, but anyway, I mean, it's important to highlight that there's not a precedent of something like this happening in the region, at least. And I believe that at some point the people of the hemisphere and in the US and around the world are gonna realize that this is crazy. This is, I mean, there is no legal framework for whatever the US diplomacy is right now doing. And I connect that to one of the elements that I wanted to highlight, which is the lack of power, or the lack of influence that the US is having in recent years, because of the rise of Russia, because of the rise of China, and not only in economic terms but in military terms. I believe that we have to pay attention to that, because that might be part of the problem, that might be part of the reasons for what is happening in Venezuela. The lack of hegemony of the US. And they are scared about China's presence, they are scared about Russia's presence in Venezuela, in the region, China's presence in not only Venezuela but in the region. They are crazy, they are scared about even Iran's presence in the region. So they are scared of everything, and they have reasons to be scared, because the US is going to be soon, it's going to stop being soon the police of the world. But they are going to do whatever they can to try to keep it like that as long as they can. But I believe that the reality in Venezuela is going to show how bad they are. So that's the point that I want to highlight about the lack of hegemony. Now I'm going to talk about the possibility, which is a real possibility, of U.S. military aggression against Venezuela, and that's not like conspiracy theories or something like that. I mean, that's a reality. And actually today, when President Trump was asked about it in a press conference, I believe that in the White House, he's reiterated that the US have all the options in hand in the case they need to use whatever options they have to do to try to get rid of Maduro's dictatorship. So that's a possibility. I believe that if they do that, I mean, it's going to be sad for my people, for us here in Venezuela, but that's going to start, but no one knows how that is going to end, because, I mean, we Latinos are Pacific people, but we are like not alone in Venezuela, even though we are surrounded right now by right-wing governments. That doesn't mean that within Colombia, Brazil, and a lot of countries in Latin America, there are no progressive forces that are capable to do whatever they have to do to try to defend the Bolivarian revolution. And I believe that that's going to happen. And that's going to create a big mess in the region. So I hope that they don't dare to do that. But that's a real possibility right now. I actually believe that's the only possibility to try to get rid of Maduro, if you ask me. And another option is a little bit more soft, is the possibility of more sanctions. And I know that that's going to happen tomorrow or after tomorrow. The White House is going to announce like more sanctions on U.S. oil, stop of buying Venezuelan oil, and all of those things that have been already published in different news outlets all over the world. So that's going to be a possibility, and I believe that the Venezuelan government is going to do something like that. They might seize Venezuelan assets in the U.S. We have a lot of assets in the U.S. We have Citgo there, refineries and gas stations And if that happened, Venezuela have also countermeasures to deal with that. I mean, Venezuela is also capable to seize U.S. assets in Venezuela, so they know that. That's part of the chess of the diplomatic relations when we are in a situation like this. So I mean, they have to do their calculations to see who's gonna lose the most if they do that move. But the possibility of sanctions, I believe that that's the most probable one. I mean, sanctions to oil, sanctions to sale of weapons or food. I mean, they already did that, covered with sanctions, with financial sanctions and things like that. So, sorry, I believe that that's going to happen. I don't. I believe that that's going to happen in less than 7 days, if you ask me. And the other thing that is important to mention when we talk about U.S. imperialism is the Lima Group and the European Union. I mean, I didn't put them like something related to regional stuff because that's too evident that it's part of the U.S. imperialist strategy. I mean, whenever the Lima Group met, they receive first, they usually organize a video conference with the Department of State. That's to give you an idea on how independent that group of countries, that group of government is. So we have to remember that Santa Lucia, Guyana, Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, of course, Panama, Costa Rica, Honduras and Guatemala form part of that. Thankfully, Mexico, right now with AMLO, have decided to not withdraw from the group. They are still there, but they have been trying to put like a rational accent within the group. So I believe that that's going to help us. But I put that like within the U.S. imperialists because it's more than evident that they are following the script. The same thing with the European Union, but with the European Union, they have too many interests in Venezuela, and I believe that they have been trying to play the good cop, bad cop game here, trying to have like ambiguity position. Actually, a few hours ago, the European Union made some statements that were very ambiguous about Venezuela, but today the UK Foreign Office said something about not recognizing Maduros and not repeating the same script. So we're going to see more like that. I believe that France also did something like that. And I believe that maybe 2 or 3 more countries from Europe are going to do the same. But they are going to try to split their positions as part of the chess that they usually love to play, thinking that we are stupid or something like that. The second point that I want to mention when I talk about international analysis is the regional strategy. I mean, Venezuela, as I already mentioned, have a lot of support, not among the governments currently, because the shift to the right from recent years, but in the people of the region. We have a lot of support, and we have like I believe like 8 new elections this year happening, and those right-wing governments in the region, they know that even if they stay in power, they have not to portray themselves like too much like a puppets of the U.S. So that's something that you have to take into consideration. People have to take into consideration because actually, I mean, there's people voting in those countries, and sometimes there are Chavistas in those countries that are gonna vote or not vote for or vote against any political options in those countries. So that's what I want to mention there, and of course mentioning that Venezuela plans to try to promote the negotiation approach, which in the framework of CELAC, which is an organization that was created by Lula, Fidel, and Chavez, or by within the framework of the United Nations. So I believe that that's the strategy. I believe that Venezuela is gonna try in the next few weeks to get some oxygen with the help of Uruguay and Mexico, and let's hope that that makes some effects, because these lucky governments, parts of the Lima group, are like too lucky, too puppets of the US, and you never know what is the lowest point that they can, fall, but it's like endless. So let's see what happens. And the last element that I wanted to highlight is the in this part of the talk is multilateralism. I mean, that's the opposite of unilateralism in foreign policy, and that means that has been Venezuelan foreign policy in recent during the whole Chavez and Bolivarian revolution time. So we have been nurturing since Chavez took office in 1999 relations with India, Turkey, China, Russia, trying to not depend that much in the US or Europe. Of course, the economic, you don't break the economic ties like cutting a tree or something like that, but no one can deny the increase of political and economic relations of Venezuela with Russia, China, and Turkey. So I believe that that's gonna happen soon. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that because of that, we can see today all the support from these countries trying to make the world understand that they are not going to support the craziness of the Department of State. So, and that's very important if you take into consideration that Russia and China are part of the Security Council of the United Nations, and that today the US called for a special meeting about Venezuela within the framework of United Nations. So their next move is going to be around whatever they can do in United Nations, because they know that they cannot do too much within the framework of the OAS. So let's see what happens. So that's basically the framework Russia is willing to support. I mean, actually today President Maduro and President Putin talked for almost half an hour. Yesterday, Erdogan from Turkey, also, which has been very supportive of Maduro in recent years, also talked lengthily with President Maduro. The Chinese government is a little bit more cautious, but in the recent week, at least 2 or 3 statements for the foreign office of China has been released, asking to respect the democracy of Venezuela and not interfere in internal affairs, and calling attention on the U.S. behavior. So I believe that we have enough international support disregarding all the numbers of countries that you see in the list that the right-wingers put here and there. And within the framework of the United Nations, they are going to have troubles because, as you know, Russia and China are countries with veto capabilities within the Security Council of United Nations, and that's going to be like a no-go for them. Disregarding making noise, I mean, using which I believe is what they are trying to use with this call for this special meeting about Venezuela. They are basically trying to create some box of resonance, make a lot of noise around Venezuela beyond the OAS. But that's already being done by the media and by all the crazy decisions that the Department of State has been making lately. So sorry for being too long, but I believe that it's important to highlight this. Right now, I have in my back the streets of Caracas, and you don't hear too much. I mean, there's no disruption in our life. Of course, yesterday a lot of places were closed because of the demonstrations. People are afraid of that. Today the the regular activity was resumed, but was also a little bit slow. But there was activity already in the streets today, and I believe that tomorrow is gonna be like business as usual. So what I ask you is to support us from abroad, from wherever you are, to visit our website, which is Orinoco, Tribune.com. OrinocoTribune.com. We try to keep updates about whatever happened in Venezuela. We are trying to translate news that use or peace articles that are usually not being translated, and that's why. And whenever they are translated, they are like they are taking out of 1,000 pieces, and they take like 10, and we are trying to put abroad to make available for English speakers abroad more information of the regular debate within Venezuela with the Venezuelan perspective, so I believe that that's important, because sometimes we got mediatized by the ways foreigners approach to Venezuelan reality, and I believe that we Venezuelans have more capability to express what is happening in our own country. And that doesn't mean that all the good projects are around there to try to help provide information about Venezuela in English are bad, but I believe that we need a fresh Venezuelan approach to what is happening here. So I invite you again to visit OrinocoTribune.com, and again, my name is Jesus Rodriguez, and I'm at your service. Bye bye.